Insurance fraud appears to be on the rise in South Africa. There have been a number of cases of people orchestrating the murder of relatives for insurance payouts. This week, the Pretoria High Court heard a case involving 42-year-old Mathabo Motsieloa, who allegedly killed a family member for 1.2 million rand insurance payout, and then started a romantic relationship with the investigating officer. Later, she allegedly worked with him to kill the station commander when he wouldn't drop the case. In 2023, South African life insurers and investment companies detected 13,074 cases of fraud and dishonesty. Jean van Niekerk, the Forensic Standing Committee convener, joins me now live. Thank you so much, Jean, for joining us this evening from the Asisa Forensic Standing Committee. Now, Jean, what exactly happened for there to be such a dramatic increase in this kind of crime?
So, Massa, I think we must appreciate murder for money, as it's termed in the media, is not a new crime. Insurance fraud dates back centuries from basically the inception of humankind and financial systems and bartering systems. In more recent times, however, I think we have seen more murder for money cases in the media. And of course, Asisa has also been making efforts to gather statistics to understand the magnitude of this issue. In 2023 alone, we saw a mere 14 cases throughout the industry. Now, whilst every life lost, of course, is one too many, we must appreciate there's a very heavy criminal element involved. And we see this associated to the increases in crime, specifically violent crime within our country as well.
That being said, I mean, that 46% increase from the previous year, we're sitting on, what, from your study, 13,074 cases of fraud and dishonesty just in 2023 alone, but then it drastically jumps as well the following year. If it is growing at this kind of a rate, of course, as you're mentioning, it's been around since the inception of humankind and insurance, but if it's now suddenly growing at this rapid rate, what can we attribute that to?
So, Massa, I would say that the statistics we're looking at is obviously for the 2023 financial year. There are a few elements that played during that time, so we must consider that post-COVID definitely plays a part. What I mean by that is during COVID, companies were very limited in what they could investigate during hard lockdowns, for example. So we did expect the statistics to normalize to an extent after COVID. But more so, I would also attribute this to the rigorous efforts of our forensics units, our insurers investing into technologies such as machine learning, AI, and big data. And we mustn't forget the critical importance of the private and public partnerships between insurance companies and law enforcement.
And how much does the industry lose because of such cases?
So we did see in 2023, for example, we had claims fraud specifically being 69.8 million rand in total. Now, this is, of course, off of a base of 170 million odd that the industry as a whole lost to fraud. But specifically for claims, we're talking about 70 million for that year.
70 million?
70, correct.
So what does that mean for those people, the majority of people who aren't trying to defraud the system? Are there more rigorous vetting processes that are now being implemented for everyone because you're trying to avoid this, you know, that the rotten apples?
Of course. So I think there's two factors. The one we must consider is that regulation is very, very stringent on treating customers fairly and obviously protecting policyholders. Now, if insurers do implement controls, measures and the likes, it is, of course, across the board. But what is very promising to look at in terms of the statistics that we gather is that we see that roughly 96% of all claims are indeed settled by life insurers. That leaves the residual of about 4% where fraud and contractual declines of claims would feature. So we do still see a very, very healthy, positive contribution by insurers into the South African market and into the broader economy.
You mentioned, of course, the societal elements as well, being in a violent society as well, and whatever happens in our environment also feeding into this kind of problem as well. I also want to talk about just the economics of it all as well. Are you finding that who are these kinds of people? Is it people who are really in desperate need of cash? Is it almost like a money-making thing? Typically, who are the case studies of people who do defraud the system?
So, Masa, I would say there's a combination. There's no one category that stands out. We do, of course, see the constrained consumer behavior, meaning opportunistic fraud by consumers. Where this really prevalently plays for those consumers is typically less violent, so it would more be paper-based fraud. And they utilize something what we call fraud as a service. So they would be purchasing fraudulent documents, perhaps through a bribery and corruption relationship, and they would facilitate fraud in that fashion. Now, of course, we can't discount that more syndicated and organized crime groups are also playing in this sphere. And that's where you typically see the more orchestrated, violent crime incidents. But it doesn't take away from the fact, of course, that we do from time to time see that there is even crime and violence against family members for the purposes of claims. So very much a mixed bag, no one specific group that's contributing to the major problem.
Yeah, and it's also a lot of the times the ones linked to family members that do make those media headlines as well, just like the one that's going on in the Pretoria High Court now of that 42-year-old Mathabo. In cases like that, where it is shown in the media, does it deter people? As the industry, do you see a decline in people attempting this kind of thing where they see that there are repercussions and there are those who will be convicted and held liable for their actions?
We definitely do, and I think it's a great example that we are seeing the media coverage of these incidents. It definitely evidences the strong work between insurers and law enforcement to bring these individuals to task. I would however say that criminality will always be a part of society, and you will always have individuals trying to outsmart and outplay the system. And unfortunately, those will be quite vigilanteist, and they will continue their moduses indefinitely. But I do believe it's promising. I think this is the evidence of the fruit that's being born between the investigations units in insurers, everything they're finding and detecting, and how strongly they're collaborating with law enforcement to bring these culprits to book.
And just finally, Jean, as that collaboration, are you seeing it bear any fruits yet? Are we seeing, I mean, of course, the numbers are increasing, but from an anecdotal point of view, are you hearing those stories of more and more people being deterred from such?
Anecdotally, I would say yes, merely due to the observation that we have within the market. So we do see a definite acceleration in terms of collaboration between companies, law enforcement, and regulators. That for me is heartwarming. I think that is the direction we need to be going as a country to combat this. Anecdotally, however, I think we have a huge crime problem in our country, of course, as we've seen violent crime increasing. And it's definitely a very, very narrow balance that we're trying to execute at this stage.
And in terms of globally, where do we rank when it comes to this kind of problem?
I don't have statistics specifically on the global comparisons of things such as murder for money or murder for insurance claims specifically, but we can perhaps look into that into future as Asisa to see how we can gauge that.
And do you see these kinds of cases that when you talk about the Rosemarys and the likes, do we see those kinds of cases happening, you know, on other parts of the continent or around the world?
Around the world, certainly, and each demographic and each society would have their own nuances. We do see this. The very first cases of these types of insurance frauds happened in the Americas originally. This is, of course, a number of years back. But we do see common trends. I think the problem that we see within our own specific countries' experience is specifically the violent crime increases. But certainly this is not isolated to South Africa, nor to our continent.
Well, Jean, thank you so much for your time this evening. Really appreciate it. And that is, of course, Jean van Niekerk, who is the Forensic Standing Committee convener from Asisa.